Hello everybody, what is up and welcome back if you're new here. I'm Liz, your host here at Crimes Untold. And today we're going to be talking about another Crimes on Pride case. Today we're going to be talking about the murder of Gwen Araujo. So this is another one of those cases that, I really dreaded covering because of the context of this case, because it really, when something hurts so bad, it hurts you internally. This is one of those cases. Yeah. But first, I want to take a quick moment to say there's been more John and Jane Does that have been identified. I have it written down on my lovely little notepad so I can tell you exactly. I will be covering these in a video coming up, so stay tuned for those. So as of right now, there has been 5 more that have been publicly identified. 2 of them have similar names but different years. So I'll kind of go through them. I'll give you their John or Jane Doe name, the year they were found, and who they've been identified as. And Othram is the one that has identified all of these. You can find these on the DNA Solves website. I'll put the website itself down below in the description box when you are seeing this video. So the 5 John or Jane Doe cases that have been identified so far, Jane Doe, or the Imlay Jane Doe of 1978, that is Florence Charleston. The Palm Beach John Doe of 1976, that is Douglas Streeter, aka Strut, that was his nickname. The Charlotte John Doe of 2021 is Cody Ray Harrell. Charlotte John Doe of 1988, that is Oliver Doc Mundy, who went by OD as his nickname. And then the Trunk Lady from 1969, she was identified as Sylvia Jane Atherton. So those are John or Jane Doe cases that I will be covering in a future video. But in the meantime, let's get into today's true crime case, shall we? But first, sippy. So, Gwen Araujo died because she was transgendered. Gwen Araujo was an amazingly beautiful soul who was taken from this earth way too soon. I think for me, what hurts mentally the most about this case is the fact that her friends, or so-called friends, are the ones that killed her. If it wasn't for the 4 men in this case, she would still be here. And the woman too, but... So the motive for these men for killing her is because she never told them that she was trans, and she had sexual encounters with a few of these men, which that too also added fuel to the fire when it came to the encounter on the night, that night before they killed her. So on the night they met, which is in late August or early September of 2002, these 4 men met Gwen Araujo. At the time they met her, she was going by the nickname of Lida, Lida. They all smoked marijuana with her. She was flirtatious with them, and then after she left, they would just talk to each other. And one of them, Jaron Neighbors, asked if she was a dude, but they didn't take this thought seriously at first. So the other 3 men are that of Jason Cazares, Michael Magnuson, and Jose Morel. She would become friends with these men, and eventually get closer to a few of them. She would have oral sex with Michael, and she would also have anal sex with Jose. And it's during these encounters that they would try and touch her, but she would stop them and quickly say that she was on her period during that time, just to cover up the fact that she still did have her male parts. Eventually, the thought of Gwen being a male would come up again, and this is because she had a fight with Nicole Brown. So Nicole Brown was dating Paul Merrill, who was Jose's older brother. And it's after this fight, in which Gwen decimated Nicole, the men thought again, she fights like a dude, but she's so small, but she's strong like a guy. And later on, after the fight, is when it's insinuated in late September of 2002 that if she wasn't a female, that something was going to happen to her, unfortunately. So leading up to her murder on October 3rd of 2002, Gwen goes to a party. So this party is at a house that is rented by Jose's brother. Also in attendance is Jaron, Michael, Jason, Nicole Brown, and Emmanuel Merrill, which is Jose and Paul's little brother. So it's during this party is when the talks of Gwen whether or not she's actually a girl comes into question again. And with this coming back into the conversation, Jaren would later state, so future Jaren at the trial would state that Jose said that if it's a man, I'm gonna kill him. Then would say, if it's a man, she ain't gonna leave. Michael would also add in, I don't know what I'm gonna do. Jaren would go on to say that whatever you do, don't make a mess. So it's according to Nicole Brown that the four men then went to a club and would come back to that house after midnight on October 4th. So after returning to the house, Michael then would confront Gwen. He would keep asking to touch her and for her to show her parts to him. Nicole then would speak up and say that one needs to force her into the bathroom so she can show her parts, or they can inspect her. So Michael takes Gwen into the bathroom. About half an hour goes by, and it's during this time that a confession is made by Jose to the fact that he had a sexual encounter with Gwen. And after this statement, Nicole goes into the bathroom and is completely shocked, and she blurts out, "It's a fucking man." This then causes the men that she had sexual interactions with to literally become angry, and it invokes a violent rage from them. So Jose threw up after finding out that she was a guy, or that she was male at birth, and then he began to cry. And Nicole would try to console him, and he also went on to say that he couldn't be gay due to him having sexual intercourse with Gwen. Nicole apparently told Gwen that the men were angry with her before trying to help her out the front door. But when Gwen got to the door, she would be forced to come back inside, and this is by Michael, because and after forcing her back inside, Michael would grab her by her skirt and her underwear. Yeah. And with doing this, he had hopes of pulling her skirt and her underwear down in an attempt to expose her to everyone. And after he wasn't successful, he then punched her in the face, in which knocked her down to the ground. And then he started putting her in a chokehold. He would be pulled off of her to stop this. It's also during this time, before this, Emmanuel, who is Jose and Paul's little brother. So he tried to get Gwen out of the house too. So Emmanuel, he has nothing to do with this violent attack on Gwen. Some of the transcriptions I've read, a lot of people bring Emmanuel into this fight, into this interaction, to this altercation, but Emmanuel has nothing to do with this. Nicole has more of a part in this rather than Emmanuel, because Emmanuel tried to get them to stop. But I will say he does leave the scene, so anybody that kind of calls him into question, he's not a part of this. So, as I was saying, Michael would be pulled off of Gwen, so the chokehold he had on her would stop. Gwen would start to beg them to stop what they were doing, and she was completely unsuccessful in convincing them to stop this assault on her, because by this time, all of the men were in a rage, and yes, they pulled Michael off of her, but all of them started their harassment on her. So they pulled Michael off. Jose would grab a metal can of food and would strike her in the head, of which would cause a cut on her, causing her to bleed. He then would go on to grab a frying pan and strike her in the head. So Gwen would speak the words, "I told you I was sorry," and this is her final words that she ever spoke prior to her death. So during this assault too, Jaren and Jason were not present, so they returned after the fact of Gwen bleeding on her head, and she's on a couch. And she was in a conscious state for the time being during this assault. So we have Michael and Jose that are basically assaulting her, and Jaren and Jason, they either left the room for something, or I don't know. It's kind of weird. So sometime after Jaren and Jason returned, the assault on Gwen resumed, and Jaren and Jason told Michael to stop what they were doing. Michael was so violent with Gwen to the point where he hit her in the head against the wall after hitting her in the head with his knee into the wall that it cracked the plaster and dented the wall. That's how hard he was hitting her head against the wall. The hits against, and Jason would kick her too. It's not just Michael, it's not just Jose. Jason at this point started kicking her at some point during this attack. And Jose, during this whole attack as well, was crying. So after he hit her, he started crying again, freaking out, man, am I gay? Am I gay? Am I gay? And oh my God, we're hitting Gwen. Or oh my God, we're hitting Lita. And he was more concerned with the fact of there being blood on the floor, or that blood was getting everywhere. So he would retreat from this assault so nobody could see him crying. I have absolutely no remorse for this man because, he's the one that hit her with a frying pan and a can of food. And then you just, out of nowhere, start crying again? No, I don't feel bad for him whatsoever. So Gwen would then be tied up. Her ankles and her wrists were bound. She would be wrapped on a blanket or wrapped up in a blanket. That way no blood would get over the couch or all over the floor. Because remember, this is a rented house. After they did this, they then would bring her into the garage so they wouldn't continue to dirty up anything in the house with her blood. So in the garage, this is when Michael would proceed to strangle her with a rope. Jason also would hit Gwen with a shovel in the head. So Jaren didn't see the actual strangulation happen, but he saw Michael with the rope on Gwen's neck before he left the garage. And it's according to Jaren as well that Michael's the one that made sure she was dead by twisting the rope around her neck and having Jason hit her 2 more times in the head with the shovel. Michael would go on to say that it was Jaren who strangled her and then hit her with the shovel. Jason said he never hit her with the shovel and that he didn't see her die. So it's a lot of blaming each other. And it's really clear that each of these men tried to throw each other under the bus. That way they wouldn't be guilty of what the other one did, whether or not they were involved. So it's following her death, they then put her in the back of, or the bed of a truck, and drove her body about 4 hours away near the Sierra Nevada mountains. There in a shallow grave, they would bury her. This was in the El Dorado National Forest, which is near Silver Fork. Following the burial, they then would drive to McDonald's and stop for breakfast. Later on, Nicole was on the phone, Nicole Brown, who was at the scene. Nicole would talk to Jose on the phone, and she asked what happened to Lita, or what happened to Gwen. Jose then said, let's just say she had a very long walk home. That's all he said. No one reported this crime. No one said anything. Gwen's mother would report her missing on October 5th, so literally the next day, or the same day, so everything started on the 3rd, and she was officially murdered on the 4th. So literally the day after her murder is when her mother reports her missing. So at first the police wouldn't make the report because she was transgendered and because it was known that Gwen oftentimes would stay away from home at night. So they didn't take it seriously. That was until rumors started happening. So if y'all don't know, when it comes to towns, things happening in towns, rumors will spread. Well, that's what happened in this town. So rumors would reach her family. And the rumor in town was that a girl was killed at a party because she was transgendered. So this rumor also included the fact that this girl was buried in Tahoe as well. What's very similar? Gwen was transgendered. She was killed at a party and she was buried within the mountains. So following this rumor, Gwen's aunt actually called the police on October 9th to relay this rumor to them. And this is when the police would interview people that attended this party, which then led them to Jose Morel. So it's on October 7th, so 2 days prior to Gwen's aunt contacted police, that Jaren's friends noticed he was kind of off and distraught. Jaren then would go on to tell a friend what he did, the other people at this party. This friend then told the police what Jaren told him. So they would have 2 different things, or 2 different people that a story of what happened would come from. So we have Jaren's friend and we also have Gwen's aunt. So this friend then, after he told the police what happened, The police asked him if he could wear a wire the next time he was with Jaron so they could hear his conversation. And this is what would tip the police off to where and what happened next. So the police, after this conversation would happen between Jaron and his friend, they then would confront Jaron, of whom agreed to bring them to Gwen's body. So at first, after him bringing the police to Gwen's body, Michael, Jaron, Jose, and Paul Morrell were all arrested, but Paul would be released following the information that Nicole Brown and Emmanuel Morrell would give them. So they kind of came in handy. On October 17th, this is when Michael, Jaron, and Jose were officially charged with the murder of Gwen Araujo. Following Jaron's arrest, he then would write a letter to his girlfriend in which detailed the murder and what happened and the involvement of Jason. Following this is when Jason would be arrested on November 19th. This is why you have to be careful about what you write in a letter, especially when you're in jail. Overall, Jaron would receive 11 years for voluntary manslaughter. Michael would receive life in prison with parole after 15 years for second-degree murder. Jose would receive the same sentence as Michael for the same charge, but was paroled in 2016. As of 2019, Michael was denied parole. Apparently, he told the parole board that he wasn't ready for release. I don't know why that was so hard for me to say. Apparently, he told the parole board he wasn't ready for release. And this is what he said to the parole board in 2016 when he was up for parole for the very first time. In 2006, Arnold Schwarzenegger ended up signing into effect the Gwen Araujo Justice for Victims Act. So this act limits the use of a panic defense of crimes against gay or trans, of which will give an allowance to jurors so that they can't have any bias on cases based on sexual orientation or what the gender identity of a victim is. Another law that followed up with this act was signed into effect in 2014 by Jerry Brown that bans the defense of one being provoked to kill after finding out gender identity or gender orientation. That way it gives more rights to those that are killed because of their orientation. So that, my friends, is the brutal death of Gwen Araujo. I hope you guys learned something from this case, and I will see you guys in my next one.